On that kind of irony note, I remember like making a new friend and they were like really awesome, really like into equality and stuff, but obviously didn't know that much about autistic experiences and didn't really know how to handle it. It seemed like from this comment I'm about to tell you about me being autistic. And they started talking about how like I didn't have as much empathy or like there was something about like me therefore not having as much empathy as them or something like that. I think the framing maybe was different, but that's basically what they were saying. And I was kind of listening to this being like, okay, like, okay. Do people not hear what they're saying? You know, and it's like, I have to put my hands up and say, like, I am obviously guilty of ableism. I have said stuff like this. I have said, when my autistic friend was telling me they thought that I was autistic, I remember just having that stereotype and being like, yeah, but I'm really empathetic. I know it sounds a bit arrogant, but I am. So, you know, and that's the kind of the stereotype I was like regurgitating. And I was saying that to my autistic friend. So obviously that's really offensive for them, for me to be like, oh, autistic people aren't empathetic to my autistic friend. Like, come on. I obviously have said sorry and like have learned a lot from that mistake. To the contrary, like autistic people can be extremely empathetic, like so empathetic that it can be like hard to function, I find. Yeah, there's like, again, really these things are, there's issues with like the cultural stereotypes and the norms and like how society like, you know, tells us what is like the normal person. There's also issues with the research with these things. You know, the fact is actually the opposite is often the case. That is such an unempathetic thing to say, you know, oh, you're not very empathetic because you're autistic. Do you see what I mean? This is kind of translated to research. A lot of the research is like studying autistic people and being like, oh, these people are empathetic. But it's all very problematic. But also it's like, if you turn that around and really studied like, you know, so-called neurotypical, you know, with the same kind of ideas, you would find like this, you know, a lack of empathy everywhere. Just again, I'm just kind of rambling and ranting. I hope this is enjoyable for you, as it is for me. Yeah, recently I had one of my parents talk about how like they heard that like how autism is caused by vaccines. With my parent, I was like, oh, I know you don't mean any harm, and I think it's important to kind of, you know, stop you right there and kind of say how that's a really problematic area and it's something that is really quite ableist, and I would really encourage you to like stay away from that. Seeing as, you know, I am, and probably you are, slash lots of other people we know are probably, because it's like, you know, family inherited and like genetic. But anyway, and I've also had relatives like talk very negatively about having disabled offspring, and I won't go into it actually because it's super dark, but it's very difficult to hear as a disabled person as well. Yeah, and then obviously there's like a part of me that wants to explain that like a lot of the problematic views around disability are inherited from like eugenics thinking, which was actually thought up in Britain, and it was used by the Nazis, unfortunately. And it's this whole idea that like we're inferior, basically, and it kind of has translated and like bled through to like be quite a big part of the mainstream perspective here, you know, which informs ableism, like a lot of the ableism that we experience today. People don't really take it very well if you tell them that they have like fascistic modes of thinking, even though actually fascistic modes of thinking is very common and mainstream. But you can't really say that to people, you know, even though it's true. I mean, that's something I'm working out as like someone who's compelled to say the truth a lot of the time. There's a really good like comedy sketch from Hannah Gatsby who like summed up my life completely, and she goes, there seems to be a piece of information you are missing. You may or may not be ready to hear this information, but knowledge is power, ignorance is a cage, and feelings can be dealt with. I bid you good day. Yeah, that's basically my life summarized. But yeah, I just think like people, they're starting to understand it slowly, but a lot of people just don't understand. And again, it's because they're not educated around it, or like we don't have school systems or like teaching systems where like diversity education and history is like taught in mainstream and is actually demonized, especially at the moment with like demonizing woke culture and stuff like that. You know, when people are like, oh, I can't say anything nowadays, it's like, well, you know, even if that was the case, you can actually say like quite a lot, considering what a lot of it actually means. But yes, there is a lot that's soaked in this kind of shit, and we're trying to like undo it and unravel it so that people have a better quality of life. But I mean, that's kind of part of why I find ableism and other oppressive views like quite hard to hear as well, because not only do you know that it really impacts people who are those marginalized categories, and it comes from really, really dark stuff. Technically, it's kind of devaluing your humanity, but it is difficult because that theorizing about these things would really put my body into like fight mode or flight mode or whatever else. But now I'm trying to understand that like a lot of the people do not mean all of that, even though like intellectually that might be where it comes from, but a lot of people are just like saying throwaway stuff that they don't really mean or haven't thought about. So that's what's really helped me in kind of managing this area. And like oppressive views, I'm just like, I'm much more like compassionate in the sense that like this person hurts as well, and that's part of why they have learned this stuff, and you know, this culture has hurt them, and that's also shit. But it's not, I don't think they're trying to like come at me with like sticks on fire and stuff like that. I just think, you know, the majority of people there's also been people that, this is like a normal, it's almost like a trope, I guess, for like autistic people to experience, of like people saying like, oh, you don't look autistic, or something along these lines. One of my clients who's a YouTuber who does videos on being autistic, Yo Sammy Sam, she's just posted a video about this if you want to check it out. And Sam does a really good job of like dissecting this subject. I remember one of my neighbors was like, when I told them I was autistic, they were like, only a little bit. And I'm like, oh my god. And we're not denying like there's different like needs, but it's really not easy. You can't frame stuff so simplistically. Like, you don't know how much I suffer internally and how much this impacts my day-to-day life. It's just like I can mask a lot of time. And as Sam says as well, like that's often a defining factor of like so-called looking autistic, because if you can mask, even though that's a privilege, you know, pass as neurotypical, it's incredibly like energy consuming. And anyway, that's its own thing. Very common for this to be quite hard to deal with. And hopefully the more information about diversity experiences and diverse experiences are shared and these things are mainstream, like equality is not a side issue, it is a fundamental central issue. It explains so much of our world suffering, including the climate issues, the kind of individual issues you have in your life. Like, this is absolutely central in everything we do, and the more we learn about it, the easier these kind of things will be, the less these things will happen, and the happier everyone will be. So yay! Yay! I know I always end with like, diversity's great, whoop whoop whoop. But it's true, that's why it's my special interest, because I know it will answer the world's problems. So yeah, those are just some examples of like really problematic stuff people say to me, like kind of regularly, like in a patterned way, that loads of other autistic folk, and I'm sure some other disabled folk as well, will identify with. Yeah, and I'm excited for this to change, because I just know that like a world that listens to disabled insights is going to be an amazing world. It's going to be so cool. And like, so for example, like in the workplace, if you kind of prioritized like autistic types of socializing, or like autistic perspectives or insights, people could be like, it could be normal to just randomly dance in your office and be like, woo, because like a lot of people autistically stim, or like sing, and like I do like singing stim. Like, imagine how much better that would be in an office. And like, if say, or I guess you wouldn't really necessarily be in an office, you know, with an autistic kind of centralized perspective, but you know what I mean, it would just be so much more nicer and funner and like joyous and accepting, and people would just be more chilled with themselves, because I think much higher proportion of people than we think are neurodiverse and or autistic and or disabled. So it's in everyone's interest for that reason, but like I'm saying, it's in like so-called non-disabled people's interest as well to celebrate these things, because it will just create a nicer climate for them and their loved ones, and for their, you know, own kind of self-love as well. And it's very likely that people will experience disability at some point in their lives. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting, and well done to all the disabled people out there. We rule. Don't know what I'm doing here. I'm just saying like, well done for managing everything. Okay. Okay. It wasn't meant to be patronizing. It was just like, you know, society can really get us down and like can really kick us in the ass so many times a day. And I just think, you know, we're here to support each other. Go us and go everyone else. Okay, bye.